When it comes to our health, what should we do to save our bacon?
Stop denigrating bacon. Bacon is sliced up meat with salt and spices. Humans have been eating bacon, eating cured meat for thousands of years. There's nothing ultra-processed about it. Nitrates are not bad for you. Big Pharma's actually studying a nitrate pill to help lower your blood pressure. If your bacon says it's nitrate-free, that's a big lie. They use celery powder to put the natural nitrates in it. The natural nitrates are exactly the same as the unnatural nitrates. Bacon is a health food.
Dr. Ken Berry sharing his thoughts on bacon on YouTube on Friday. Felicity, why?
Well, the story is actually a UK-based one, so I don't know whether he's reacting to what's going over here or not. But basically, a group of scientists have written to Wes Streeting, the health secretary, urging them to add cigarette-style labels to processed meats, so your ham and your bacon, etc., to warn consumers that the chemicals in them are a major contributor to bowel cancer. And they're doing this now because last Saturday marked a bit of a milestone. It's a decade since the World Health Organization declared processed meat to be carcinogenic to humans, and they put it in the same category as tobacco and asbestos. And I would say off the bat that I think that's slightly misleading. It was misleading 10 years ago. It's misleading now to equate smoking and eating bacon is erroneous, and we can get on to why it's been put in the same category later. It's a story about whether we want big, scary labels all over your bacon saying that you're going to die of cancer if you eat it.
Okay, for the scientists who do think that these labels should be on there, just explain briefly what the health risks actually are.
The issue is to do with chemicals called nitrites and nitrates, which are slightly different to do with the makeup of how many oxygen atoms and how many nitrogen atoms they have. But essentially, they are added to bacon and other processed meats as a preservative and to add flavour and also affect the colouring, and it gives them a longer shelf life. It's complicated because actually they are found naturally in many fruits and vegetables, and in and of themselves are not necessarily bad for you, and it can actually be good for you. And some of them are found in the soil and all that sort of thing. But when they are cooked and eaten, nitrates produce nitrosamines, which are chemicals that can cause cancer. It depends how they're cooked and if they're paired up with proteins, amino acids, they change inside the body and they can produce reactions in the intestine that can produce bowel cancer and other cancers.
Our man there in the clip, Harriet, was saying even if you try and find nitrate-free bacon, I mean, he was talking about the US, I don't know if it's the same here, that no such thing really exists. Is that the case? I'm trying to think whether I've ever seen bacon or ham advertised in that way in the supermarket anyway. Does the consumer have a choice?
Well, they think that in Britain, an estimated 90 to 95% of bacon and ham contains these chemicals. So it is possible to get some that are marked as nitrate-free, but obviously the vast majority of them aren't. And that's the case in Britain. I'm not sure about the case in the US.
Do you worry about the carcinogenic links personally?
I think it's a complicated picture because the carcinogenic link isn't very clear and it's not necessarily that well established. The Department of Health and Social Care says it's inconclusive, but it's worth saying that even though the World Health Organization did declare processed meat carcinogenic to humans, and that puts it in the same category as alcohol and tobacco, it doesn't mean to say that the World Health Organization is equating the risk with tobacco and alcohol. Like, yes, we can point to a link between nitrates and particularly like how they're cooked and how they're consumed, like with processed meat, and cancer, particularly bowel cancer, which is on the rise. The actual risk is still quite small. So if they think that in the UK, out of everyone who eats 50 grams of processed meat per day, so that's about like 3 rashers of bacon, the chance of getting bowel cancer is 7 out of 100, as opposed to 6 out of 100 who will get bowel cancer in their lives in general. So the actual risk difference is quite small, but the cancer causing properties of these chemicals there's gathering evidence to suggest that there is a link.
Okay, that's interesting, isn't it, that it is only a small increase really, Jamie? Do you think that explains why the government, accused of doing nothing on this for a decade, as Felicity was saying, haven't done anything, haven't put this kind of warning on?
Yeah, I think that's partially part of it. That's maybe giving them a little bit of a free pass. The government would say that, so like in the UK, regulators kind of review typical exposures when it comes to nitrites and nitrates and the science, and the Food Standard Agency has assessed the current permitted levels and considers them within the safety margins. The idea is that they're meant to update those as new evidence emerges. So if it becomes clear that some things are more carcinogenic than others, campaigners argue that these margins are now outdated and kind of not precautionary enough. The other big thing, I guess, is lobbying from we know from things like the sugar tax and actually discussion. Big pork, yeah, big pork, big ham. Two of the biggest lobbyists. The UK's like flirted with some measures in terms of labelling and packaging, and I would say actually potentially has got the kind of balance kind of correct at the moment. You know, the introduction of the traffic light system, which obviously came from the EU, I actually think really does work and has kind of stuck in the mind and is good for kids and is good for adults. Maybe we don't need, I know maybe Felicity will come on to this, but in Mexico they're using massive kind of front of pack labelling on ultra processed foods, like big octagon warning, kind of black label similar to like cigarettes and alcohol. And, you know, some people will say that that is necessary, but I guess there's an element of like not wanting to scare people as well into a situation in which they don't feel like they can get the right education or information that they need.
It's also, I suppose, something that's added to food as an ingredient, isn't it, Felicity, rather than just eaten in and of itself. And so many recipes start with frying off some bacon at the beginning of the recipe. And I guess people aren't looking at the traffic lights when they're doing that, are they? That it's just it's a fat, it's a lubricant that you stick in the food at the beginning.
Yeah, true. And it's such a basic point to make, but I feel with all of these like health and diet related stories, probably the most true and sensible and helpful thing you can say is eat it in moderation. Like, I don't think anyone regards bacon as a health food. And if you're eating a bacon sandwich 3 times a day, you must know that that's an unhealthy thing to do. But adding a small amount of bacon, like you said, as a base to a bolognese or having a bacon sandwich every now and again, I can't really see how that could be bad for your health. I mean, certainly, you know, you can't just like cut bacon off from the animal and eat it. Like, these are also preservatives that are being added. And, you know, some people would say that actually by adding these chemicals, you're actually making them safer to eat because it can, you know, reduce the risk of getting like bacteria in the meat and all that sort of thing. So there's food safety issues, which is why preservatives are added to the food. And when you think about the list of ingredients found in other products on the shelves and like the huge amount of ultra processed foods, UPFs that are out there with all sorts of like weird and wacky ingredients, it's strange to me to make bacon like the bogeyman of like the food on what's out there, basically.
Yeah, I suppose it's also not addictive, is it? That's the other thing. Comparing it to tobacco, you know, you can have bacon occasionally. You might be craving it, but it's not quite the same as tobacco, which lures you back in for more when we know it's bad. But a couple of people have mentioned UPFs now, Harriet, ultra processed foods. That really is a big conversation, isn't it? And I guess the point is people are looking for the link between UPFs and the rise in cancer. They want to say, look at all this crap we're eating. Of course, that's the reason we're getting cancer. But it's hard to prove a link. It's such a nefarious term and it means so many different ingredients. Maybe they're just latching on to the thing we know can cause cancer.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the conversation around ultra-processed food is that even though this is a term that was actually coined by a Brazilian back in 2009, there is no one scientific consensus on what it actually means. So it's like industrially formulated products which have like high fats, starches, sugars, additives, flavorings, coloring, preservatives. But there is no definition that you can point to what actually constitutes an ultra processed product. But this conversation and this concern has kind of been like turbocharged over the past few years by one doctor, Dr. Chris Van Tulleken, who has made kind of an astonishing fortune with his book that's kind of demonized ultra processed food. This is a very, very, very big picture. Like at the moment, we're just talking about nitrites and nitrates that are in all processed meats and pork, not just bacon. But the conversation around ultra-processed food is significantly bigger. I think the issue here is that it is true that rates of bowel cancer have increased pretty dramatically over the past 2 decades, among adults under 50 especially. So the incidence has kind of doubled every decade, but scientists haven't really got like one specific reason why. And there has been some link with eating processed meat every day. And there's another link that's been discussed a lot this year, which is a toxin called colobactin, which they believe that exposure to this toxin that happens in the first 10 years of your life could be manipulating DNA and increasing your cancer risk. But it's basically not clear. There is a big, what the World Health Organization has termed an infodemic around these so-called ultra-processed foods kind of being lumped together and demonized under one undefined umbrella. And there is starting to be quite a significant pushback to that from scientists that say, actually, this is kind of fueling guilt and anxiety, because the food chain being what it is and the food industry being what it is not actually very easy to eat whole, unprocessed, organic, just like fruit and veg. Like, it's not actually very accessible to most people, and the stigmatization around processed food has kind of led to people feeling like it's their personal fault for how they eat, where actually like the fault is on, like Jamie was saying, these incredibly powerful food companies and drink companies who stand to lose a significant amount of money.
Yeah, so I mean, with that in mind, Jamie, why stigmatize, why demonize, why, label with a warning any foodstuff? If it's complicated, why not just encourage people to eat the good stuff? Why not lay out the supermarket, fruit, vegetables, fish, meat, and you know what it is, and you give basic advice on what people should be eating, and then if they pick up some Pepsi as well, that's up to them.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think it's kind of slightly kind of common sense in terms of, if you read into it, the kind of nuanced message is that actually what we want is a kind of a balanced diet, reducing your kind of regular consumption of processed meats, of course, but eating more fiber, vegetables, whole grains, the kind of stuff that people do know about. I think if the question is like, why this demonization of it is, I think cancer is now one of the big worries in people's lives, and I think, but particularly post-COVID, there's been a very readily acceptance of what you could class as like conspiracy theory, but also is just kind of like, you can't trust what is being given to some, like to you in some way. And I think that ties in with this, which is like the demonization of some food and of some aspects of it as causing cancer does make people a bit more hesitant about accepting kind of the truth. And again, it is about nuance and really thinking about what you're eating, and conscious eating and mindful eating is kind of what people should be pushing. In terms of like policy interventions, some front of pack warnings have helped, but the kind of blanket UPF warnings maybe isn't such a good thing. Obviously, I'm going to say this, but I think taxation and subsidy to make the stuff that is good for you, that we know is good for you, cheaper, and because that's a big part of when we talk about ultra processed foods, is that a lot of this stuff is cheaper and easier to get hold of than some of the stuff that is good for you. I kind of see that going hand in hand, is that there's got to be a way to bring the prices of fruit and veg down. Yeah, I mean, on that then, Felicity, finally, we've talked about the different things that governments could do, that regulators could do. What do you think will actually happen? Because, actually, the Conservative government were sort of surprisingly keen to try some of this stuff, weren't they? Sugar tax, etc. We've got a Labour government now. They're normally more into the nanny state stuff, more willing to put labels on things and tell people what they should and shouldn't eat. Do you think they're going to do something?
Well, I mean, these scientists have said that nothing's been done for the last decade. Off of that, it suggests that they're not really going to do anything. I'm not sure they should do anything, really. I'm certainly not a fan of these labels that are being suggested. I don't think that's a good idea. I really think that instead of going after people, they should go after companies, and there should be a crackdown on companies being able to sell these foods that are so bad for our health, rather than demonizing everyday people who, of course, are also having to face cost of living crisis and all that sort of thing. So I would be surprised if the government did wade into it. I think it would be inadvisable to do so. I think most people see it as a sort of nannying interference in their lives. And based on what we were saying about science backing up some of the findings and how it can be inconclusive or problematic and I'm not going to go down the route of epidemiology, but a lot of people, find epidemiological studies very difficult and very problematic, then I really hope they're going to do anything. They go after, the huge companies that are shoving all this unhealthy food into our diets.
Yeah, and maybe the influencers telling us what we should be eating. If you want my tip, smother all meat in very rich hollandaise sauce, then it's fine.